Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Weekly Media Briefing for Tuesday, 15 October 2019. I'm Superintendent Wayne Meister, Public Information Officer of the TTPS. Today's media conference will address the legality of the treatment of persons in centers across this country. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is actively enforcing the laws at all institutions and facilities which are providing care to children, the elderly, and those with mental health issues. Today we'll hear from experts in the field of mental health and the aging. At the head table, we have the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Gary Griffith, gerontologist and former director of the Division of Aging in the Ministry of Social Development, Dr. Jennifer Rouse. We have the Director of Legal of the TTPS, Mr. Christian Chandler, International Security Consultant and retired Special Agent in charge of the Los Angeles Field Office Criminal Division, Mr. Robert Clark will be joining us via Skype. Executive Director at Journey Out organization, which assists victims of human trafficking, Ms. Stephanie Powell. We also have in our audience Acting Deputy of Commissioner Jason Ford in charge of operations, Nigel Selina of the Trinidad and Tobago Citizens Alliance, and the Victims and Witness Support Unit, Ms. Aisha Kobe. Welcome to each and every one of you. I now hand you over to the Commissioner of Police.
Thank you very much. Members of the media, good afternoon. As Mr. Meister stated, this conference has become mandatory to clarify a number of misleading comments by some in relation to the unfortunate discovery a few days ago of dozens of persons being held in what can only be described as inhumane conditions. Yet some actually try to justify it. I was actually asked to apologize a few days ago for adhering to my oath in office. I was asked to apologize for freeing dozens of persons from captivity against their will. Members of the media, I am prepared to do so now. I apologize to those persons who were in prison. I apologize to the family members who did not know. I apologize that I did not act sooner, because that is my oath and that's my responsibility as a Commissioner of Police. A media house actually reached a point where they hunted far and wide to try to find the very few people who condoned such a barbaric act. And it was only due to the desperation to find a balance. That is the example that was stated. They had to find a balance. So we have reached a point in our society. It is no longer about right or wrong. It is a matter of let us find a balance. So one wonders that in the future, if the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, they arrest a gang leader, you will try to find all the good things about the gang leader to find a balance. If it is you apprehend a terrorist, you will try to find a balance to justify why he did it, or a child molester. We need to start checking ourselves and understanding the importance of what we need to do to make this a better country. Family members were also fully aware of what their loved ones were going through and they were satisfied. That is also indeed unfortunate. And to those who condone this, that was also unfortunate. This is not how we are supposed to treat those who need our help. I also heard some very comical statements by others. There were some born-again bush lawyers who tried to justify and explain that they said this is not human trafficking. I have the experts here, not certain persons, Tom, Dick, and Kijan, who feel that they know about human trafficking and the meaning of it. I'm speaking about experts here who are fully trained and understand the difference. Some people feel that human trafficking, maybe they've watched too many Liam Neeson take movies. Ladies and gentlemen, human trafficking is not just about sexual slavery. And with the experts here, it is hoped that certain individuals who did not understand, but for sensationalism, they try to make stories. It will be able to put a little clearer light in the picture. When we see something so unfortunate that people try to find a balance, we know the point we have reached. With this, Mr. Meister, I would like now to introduce Mr. Robert. You want to go ahead? Yes, let's go ahead, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the Assistant Special Agent in charge, who was retired at the Los Angeles Field Office Criminal Division, Mr. Clark, who is recently retired. And he would have worked with, had several assignments with the FBI office in Los Angeles, where he was assigned in 2007. Mr. Clark has dedicated his 30 years career not to only serving and protecting, but demonstrating leadership in the development of innovative and proactive measures designed not only to address violent crime, but also to implement health, healing, restoration in those areas, neighborhoods, and communities afflicted by crime and violence. Ladies and gentlemen, we now introduce to you Mr. Clark, Robert Clark.
Good morning. Good day, everyone. I'm having a really hard time hearing you, but it's certainly my honor to be with you, Commissioner, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. As was shared with you, just very quickly, I was in charge of the Crimes Against Children's program for the FBI in Los Angeles, which had responsibility for the western part of the United States, as well as all the way out through the Southeast Asia and the Asia continent. A very in-depth experience with not only identifying human trafficking, but investigating human trafficking, and also working in collaboration with nonprofit organizations to make sure that once we identified victims, rescued victims, that we would be able to put them into restoration facilities so that they could begin to rebuild their lives. Also involved quite in depth with training and education and awareness to make sure that everyone understood what human trafficking looks like, because as we have coined the phrase, it's a problem that hides in plain sight. So it's my honor to be with you today, Commissioner, and with Dr. Powell and with all of you, and certainly we are available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Clark, can you just give us a brief as to what you've seen pertaining to human trafficking of this nature in other countries and in relation to what you've seen in Trinidad and Tobago over the last few days, please?
Yes, Commissioner, I will. From my experience with the FBI, I spent over 3.5 years in Central America, and I was able to witness human trafficking very similar to what we've seen in Trinidad and Tobago these last couple of weeks. Over the last several months that I've been in Trinidad and Tobago, I have shared with my TTPS counterparts, as well as the NGO partners that we have, that the problem of human trafficking was pervasive in the country as it pertained to those who are facilitating human trafficking from an organized crime perspective, from a familial perspective, and certainly those who are coming over from Venezuela and how they would be subjected to human trafficking organizations, quite simply because it's a problem that hides in plain sight. Human trafficking victims are a replenishable resource, and it's unlike drugs and guns, which once those are seized, they are gone. Human trafficking victims can be used over and over and over again. And what we have seen these last weeks in Trinidad and Tobago is not unlike what we are seeing globally, both in the United States and around the world.
And this also, you've seen, I think, pertaining to faith-based organizations being used as a front for this too, as well?
Yes, Commissioner, there are a multitude of organizations that use their, what appears to be legitimate businesses or faith-based organizations or rescue organizations to facilitate human trafficking. Every day there are news stories that we read, that we're hearing about cases and investigations and rescue operations that are very similar to what we have seen in Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. So, you know, and members of the media, because we have heard recently even comments that said people have a right to do wrong, to do the right thing. That is utter nonsense. There was an actual editorial from the Express that stated that I do not understand that this is part of the rehabilitative process for recidivism. So the Express editorial is actually trying to state that someone comes out of a 12 by 12 foot prison and you rehabilitate them by putting them in a 6 by 6 foot prison. And to those who said I do not understand, my Masters of Science also includes recidivism. So I fully understand, and other people need to understand this is not a form of a rehabilitative process. What I would like to do, Mr. Meister, is now to invite Ms. Powell, please.
Okay, and just a bit about Ms. Powell. Ms. Powell would have worked in the area of domestic human sex trafficking for approximately 9 years, and she gained her experience in the area as a sergeant within the Los Angeles Police Department in charge of the Vice Unit. Once retired, she became the head of the non-profit organization called Journey Out, known as the Mary Magdalene Project. And Journey Out would assist victims of human trafficking, and she would have assisted that department would have assisted 1,000 victims with places to live, food, clothing, and from given the whole aspect of counseling and prosecution. So, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Stephanie Powell, welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good afternoon.
Outstanding. One thing that I would like to add to what Mr. Clark said is that it is hiding in plain sight, and that traffickers will prey on the vulnerable. And in this case, from what I have read, certainly these people were at risk when they entered this facility. So I wanted to add that to the conversation as well. And not to mention the fact that a lot of times, especially when it comes to law enforcement, it is so important what you guys have done, it's very obvious, is being able to identify human trafficking even though it may not present itself as such. So it might be hiding in the shadows of a murder case or gang activity or drug activity, and most importantly, that it's not only international but national as well.
Thank you very much. And members of the media, again, we actually heard a media house, I wouldn't call TV6 name, but they actually stated that they didn't see evidence to verify that there was such. So all of a sudden now a media house becomes an investigative unit that they will do their own parallel investigation. So in future, if somebody is arrested for gang activity, it means a media house will say, well, this person has been arrested, but we have seen no evidence or anything to verify that. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not the way we should go. I will ask now Mr. Chandler, head of legal, to explain that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, as much as we are very disappointed that certain individuals could try to turn a blind eye and try to put some degree of, to rationalize what we have seen. What we are doing is we are adhering to ensure that the law is not broken. So even though there are inhumane acts that we have seen, the fact of the matter is that we are looking at laws, and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, our job is to enforce the law. There are a number of different things we can look at, from human trafficking, false imprisonment, fraud, actions taken against the elderly. But I'll leave it now to the head of legal, Mr. Chandler, to explain why and how the police service can and would get involved in such a situation.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everyone. To start with, this is centered around the issue of mental health. And my starting point, the genesis, should be the Mental Health Act, and whether that has been traversed. And the TTPS, in conducting this operation, would have considered the Mental Health Act, particularly Section 2, which provides for approved homes. So the first question that should be considered is whether or not this facility was an approved home pursuant to the Mental Health Act, because the Act sets out how the home becomes approved. And this is done through a prescribed form and an application to the Minister, so the Minister of Health. So it begs the question, were they an approved facility? Because if they weren't an approved facility, it means therefore that they would have been committing an offense under the Mental Health Act. And that in itself lends itself to the fact that the law has been broken and the TTPS has a duty to act. Further to that, that act also sets out abuse of persons, mentally ill persons, and it treats with that. And what we must be careful with is the framework. Because when you consider Section 28, subsection 5, it sets out really and truly what is required when issuing a certificate. So I'll just quickly read for you. It says a certificate shall not be issued unless the house, its location with regard to neighboring premises, and its proposed facility and equipment are suitable for the purpose for which it is intended, and the minister is satisfied as to the character and the fitness of the applicant. So what this says is that certain checks and balances ought to have been carried out. And it asks us, now, if it was in fact carried out, who carried this out? And is there any sort of regulatory body or any oversight committee that treats with this? Because it is no secret that mental health is an illness and it needs to be properly addressed. It clearly is still taboo in our jurisdiction. And people, it's a conversation that people don't want to have. We know that St. Anne's is oversubscribed. So we need approved facilities, and we would want to encourage that. But it must be regulated. And with the situation as discovered, expanding on what the Commissioner has said, we have reports that we are investigating now as it pertains to offences against the persons. So we would have had persons complaining of assaults, which amount to assault occasional actual bodily harm. You may ask yourself, well, what is that? Simply in the Old English Authority, R against Miller, says that, Ilinsky J says, actual bodily harm is any hurt, injury calculated to interfere with the health and comfort of an individual. So we have these reports, and we are duty-bound to, again, investigate these. Also, under the Summary Offences Act, Section 5, it prescribes an aggravated assault. What is an aggravated assault is set out in there. So whilst we're talking about trafficking in persons, there are other offences that are being investigated, and there are other reports that we are dealing with. And I know that trafficking in persons, on the face of it, people will say, well, they believe it just pertains to sexual exploitation and that sort of thing. When you look at the interpretation section of the Trafficking in Persons Act, it sets out what exploitation is. And exploitation can be many different things, but more importantly, exploitation can be deriving a benefit through the abuse of another person. So we must juxtapose what the law is as opposed to what is being put out there, and understand that the law needs to be adhered to, and that is the remit of the Commissioner. And
Thank you very much. As I said, it is unfortunate that some have tried to justify, trivialize, or even legitimize what was seen. Some stated it's because these individuals have nowhere to go. You do not justify doing something wrong to get something right. That is not caring. This is not a banana republic. We have seen a situation where something may be wrong, and the job of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is to ensure that the law will be enforced. And to the persons who try to justify or trivialize this, I'm sure that those same individuals will not have placed their mother in that same institution. And I'm sure those same individuals that try to justify or trivialize this, they would be very fearful and will definitely not want to have their children place them there if, heaven forbid, they become an elderly person or someone who's mentally challenged. We must look in the mirror before we make decisions. I will now ask Dr. Rouse.
Dr. Jennifer Rouse, a gerontologist by profession and the former director of the Division of Aging in the Ministry of Social Development and Family Service in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Rouse was this country's first director of the Division of Aging, where she spent 15 years in the position. The division was established to serve as an umbrella agency to focus on aging initiatives. Dr. Rouse?
Good day to everyone here, and I must say thank you first to the Commissioner for acting in real time, because you heard just now my tenure was 15 years, and I had been an advocate on the ground looking for that nexus between the penal system and the social system, because it is clear that the way that the policemen are trained, policemen and women are trained, they have a specific role and duty, and they are very clear on their parameters. But when we noticed in the Division of Aging, as you heard, it was established in 2003. And with my coming in, because I was the first director, I recognized that aging at the time was a social issue, so that we had to hit the ground running and sensitize persons, sensitize and educate the public on this particular target group, which at the time was about 10% of the total population that is aged 60 years and over. With the last census, it measured 13.4% of the total population, which is about 177,000 plus persons that are 60 years and over. So we're talking about retirees here. But when we look at from 2010, when that last census was done, to now, 2019, we're looking at nearly 15% of the total population. And it is established with the United Nations that once the elderly grow in numbers as a critical mass of the population, commensurate with that is the increase in elder abuse. And we did see that in real terms because we established in 2004 an 800 toll-free number to facilitate persons calling in to know where goods and services existed. And that number, it was the Older Persons Information Center, 800 OPIC, to let persons know in the public they could call this number and just ask for information and so gathering for the elderly. Little did we know that would have turned into a hotline for elder abuse. And so we ended up having to do an annual report on the OPIC cases coming in. And I cannot tell you how that has spiked in terms of elder abuse across the board in Trinidad. And the commissioner made a very telling statement where there's this kind of facade that we hold up, that we care for our elderly, and oh Lord, you know, and it be seen at an emotional level. But what is on the underbelly and is not underscored and not recorded in the measures that we are seeing is that this social issue of aging has now morphed into an economic issue. Yes, part of that economic issue is that we have pensions and so from the government that is escalating and is now almost 4% of the GDP of the budget. But on the other side, what we are seeing is the abuse on elders because of their property. And so we are seeing where the family structure, which has changed from extended members in a family to now a nuclear single-headed households, and that burden, which is, I don't know how they came up with the burden of care, that never used to be. At a communal level, that never used to be. We just knew it was a duty of everyone in the household and the community, by extension, to take care of our elders. But now, with this economic drive and this work-life imbalance that we are seeing persons that you least expected can afford to place their seniors in the right care environment, actually putting them, and I specifically use the word putting, and never going back to visit that older person. Sometimes they mail the check into the home. They do not visit. They don't care. That whole element of caring for your seniors is now almost out the window. And so the cliche is, yes, we need to care. But what we are seeing is that families have broken down and they are abrogating their right to what their duty and responsibilities are, because most of the seniors, and mind you, because of the life expectancy of the seniors now having extended, because in Trinidad and Tobago, the average life expectancy of the male is 78 years and the female is 81. So we have a whole group of centenarians who exceed over 150. Some of them are infirm. And some of the abuse that we are seeing is when even we get caregivers to go into the homes, in the residential homes in the community. Some are sexually abusing the infirm and bedridden. Some are just telling them who are in early stages of dementia to put their fingerprint to sign as a signage of a document so that they can get, and don't ask for the powers of attorney, because the power of attorney would only have life until the demise of that older person. But they swindle them out of their property, including classified ads for sale while the older person is alive and is not in a position mentally to say or do anything, and not knowing all the funds are being taken, and they need that legal advice given to relatives. So because of this burden of care being now vested with one or two family members, they just shuffle them into a home, and they don't worry to check on whether the standards are in place. They don't worry to check on all the various things that they would have liked for their own selves. And this is where we are. And nothing, sometimes, you know, something must happen for something to happen. And it is unfortunate that we had to see it in this way last week when we found TLM, but this is the result of it, and I'm very pleased and very proud of our commissioner. And one thing I must add, in case he wasn't aware, the TTPS Academy took the initiative, because many of the elder abuse cases that we had to do in the community, we had to co-opt the services of the community police. And some of them didn't understand the nexus between their service and where the law ended and what they could actually do, because we couldn't close down these facilities because of the limitations of the same laws. And we didn't know which law would be suitable to go there to effect a change. So as a result of which, the TTPS Academy held two, so far as I know, up to my tenure last year, they held 2 workshops where they tried to corral all the various stakeholders of the vulnerable groups, especially persons with disability, the elderly, all across the board. And I have to commend them for that initiative, because they brought all these stakeholders together so that they now, as police officers, would get a real inside understanding of what is care, what is seen as care, and the various types of abuse, how to recognize them and take action. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. What we have seen is that we have opened up Pandora's box, and unfortunately at times people fear change. But this is something we have to face. This is reality. We have situations in this country where many persons who cannot defend themselves need to be defended. As the Commissioner of Police and as the Trinidad and Tobago, speaking on behalf of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, I can assure you, we intend to defend those who cannot defend themselves. We must not become enablers, because we've again heard these individuals, well, sometimes you have to put these persons in cells. If it is you do the research, you will realize these cells are supposed to be padded. And there are a number of other things. The organizations need to adhere to the basic regulations. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, our job is to ensure that all of these organizations would get their act together. We must never become immune to hate, crime, and the inhumane acts that we have seen in this country by those who need defending and cannot defend themselves. As the Commissioner of Police, again I state that those individuals, those organizations, from whether it be the abuse of children, domestic violence, young men being recruited in gangs, persons being recruited into terrorism, addicted to drugs, human trafficking, the elderly, the mentally challenged, we intend to do what is required to defend these people. They must not be abused by other individuals who have their own agenda. I'm pleased also to see that the situation in the St. Anne's institution, that is also being dealt with. Because I wish to make this statement now, that as the Commissioner of Police, what you saw 2 weeks ago, it is not going to be a change. I intend to parang from house to house, every single institution that takes care of elderly, children, or anyone who needs help. They need to get their act together. I'm fully aware that this is a situation that we have trivialized for decades. So it will take some time for persons to understand. But we cannot trivialize a situation like this. And that is why the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, you would have seen a number of new units being formed recently, being launched, such as the Gender-Based Violence Unit, unit to deal with school security, cruelty to animals, and what SWAT did, I wish to commend them, whereas other people try to condemn them because they just did not understand. We are here to defend those who cannot defend themselves. Mr. Clark and Ms. Powell, any other comment you'd like to make before I open questions to the media?
Go ahead, Dr. Powell. You're on mute.
She's on mute. Robert, probably you could. Yeah, Robert, you could continue. You could go on in the meantime.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, I'm inspired by your words. I'm anxious to return to Trinidad and Tobago and stand side by side with you and the many officers of the TTPS to address not only just human trafficking, but murders and gangs, because we understand in the U.S. and around the world, we understand that gangs and human trafficking have now created a dynamic partnership because they, again, have seen it as a replenishable resource and much more profitable than trying to transport weapons and drugs. So I'm anxious to return to the country to stand side by side with you. Thank you for your words today. I'm inspired by what you said today. And you're right, we do have to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves and those victims that have fallen silent. We have to continue to do this work and partner with all of the agencies that are represented here today and those we will partner with in the future to make sure that we protect those who can't protect themselves and speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. So thank you very much.
Mr. Commissioner,
Okay.
I too would like to commend you on your words. They really made me smile. There's so much work to be done worldwide as it pertains to human trafficking, and I believe that your country is going in the right direction, and that in this particular case, you are looking at not just the fact of what you saw as it pertains to mental illness, but the possibility of what else could be happening as it pertains to human trafficking, and being able to look at it with a 360 view. So with that, I commend you, and I am sure that you're going to find some things that are in the shadows, and I am also sure that you are going to do all the training. You are going to make sure that nonprofits are assisting you in the victims that you may uncover. So with that, sir, I commend you.
Okay, thank you very much. So before I open for questions, again, as I stated, there will be a number of different matters we'll be looking at. I ask the public, if you see something, say something. The vast majority of this country, it involves law-abiding citizens who want to make a difference. Others who prefer to bury their heads in the sand and pretend it is not a problem, well then I pity you on that. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, we would investigate these matters of all institutions, be it kidnapping, false imprisonment, fraud, and again looking at the laws under the Mental Health Act, the Private Hospitals Act, assaults in varying degrees against the offences against the Persons Act and Summary Offences Act, as well as the Occupational Act and the Safety Act. Take care of our elderly, those who are mentally challenged, our children. Take care of the citizens of this country. Members of the media, open now to questions.
All right, please be reminded we are strapped for time, so please identify yourself and you be the host. Let's make the questions brief.
Afternoon, Commissioner. Well, you've already introduced me. I'll reintroduce myself. Keyshan Haynes, TV6. On behalf of my station, let me just say from the outset that nobody is condoning the conditions that they were found. We had issue with your use of the term human trafficking.
But I think I just educated you to
And
know
as
now.
we can see by this, you stand by that too. Right.
But you don't. So you still feel human trafficking is the Liam Neeson movies
Commissioner,
from Taken. I just want to educate you so you'll understand the meaning of human trafficking, that's all.
We are strapped for time. May I ask my question?
Yeah, I'm here to educate you.
All right, Mr. Commissioner. So the obvious question is, if this is, in your words, the largest human trafficking ring ever uncovered in the country, how soon can we expect charges? It's my understanding that the pastor was out the same night. Everything is back to normal as far as his church. He is back out. How soon can we expect charges of specifically human trafficking against Pastor Awang?
Okay, I can have DCP Ford answer because there's something called an investigation, and there are a number of matters here we are investigating. We have 69 persons. Each and every individual has a different story, has a different concern, some of the family members, and it varies from a number of different matters that we are dealing with and liaising on a daily basis with the DPP. So I can ask Mr. Ford. Mr. Ford, just come forward. To the podium. Yes, to the podium, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, other members of the head table. Good afternoon, members of the press present. Mr. Haynes, I would really like to tell you that by midnight tonight, you can charge all who are culpable. However, you would appreciate that we have an ongoing investigation. And as the Commissioner has said, there are a lot of moving parts. And you want to get it right. We are conferring with the Deputy, with the Director of Public Prosecutions. We have a team that has been assigned to conduct this investigation. And as soon as we have enough that we can share with you all, we will share with you all. But the thing is that we are moving assiduously to charge anyone who is culpable for this hideous act that was perpetrated upon us.
Okay.
Yes, sir, as Express newspapers, have all the 69 people who will
Mr. Ford,
taken from the facility, or as you deem rescued from the facility, have they all been questioned, interviewed, and what is the status of them? Where are they now?
Okay. The persons who were removed from that facility, as you know, some of them had some mental health issues. and there's a process where they had to be medically examined. That process continues, and as they're examined and the police officers get the green light, we will be interviewing persons. We have interviewed several persons, we have gathered a lot of evidence, but the investigations continue, and we will investigate and we will question the people as we go forward.
Okay, any other, I would like to spread it around so that each person would, could ask at least one question, if you do.
Hi, good day, Mr. Commissioner. James Bovell from the Newsday newspaper here. Closing off the introduction you gave us there, you told the public, if you see something, say something. I think, well, from some of the relatives of the patients at the facility that I have spoken to, they said while they were aware that there was some sort of rehabilitation going on, they were largely ignorant of the cells and the handcuffs and so on.
That is true.
What advice would you give to people who have relatives suffering with mental illnesses and substance abuse issues, going forward trying to find a facility to give them care, that they're also not having something like this hidden away from them?
Good question. And this is what I will ask all family members. What we are picking up is many of the family members, they were not aware of the cages and how the individuals were treated. Where it is we have reports of individuals, tasers were used on them, batons, also there were shackles on beds. And the family members, when they went to visit their loved ones, these things were not seen. So what I would recommend strongly with all family members, you need to make full use and visit and have a thorough investigation of the surroundings at all times, and not just look at the cosmetic part that you may just see. As it pertains to that, again, there will be an app that will be coming out shortly from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to assist the public in giving information in real time without any fear of reprisal. And I would also like to take this opportunity to just clarify another matter that we saw on The Guardian recently, where it spoke about social spies. I would like to clarify the introduction of the social media monitoring unit. In contrast to the misinterpretation by some, this is not to macro people. The fact of the matter is that the social media monitoring unit, this is something that is used worldwide. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, because of the MOU we have with the NYPD, I actually looked at the social media monitoring unit. This is something that is used in most police departments around the world, and this is not in breach of the Interception of Communication Act. We are not breaking any law. What this unit will be doing, in fact, is actually seeing what anyone could see on Facebook, social media. So it is something that you're seeing that is in the public. What this can do, this is going to assist us greatly in dealing with just a few matters that could be of concern to this country that we never took seriously in the past, which is child pornography, child prostitution, human trafficking by ads, terrorist recruitment, gang recruitment, tips when persons make comments to solve a crime, info to prevent a crime that may about to take place, and a number of other matters. That is the importance of the social media monitoring unit.
We'll take the final question from Mr. Basant.
I give Commissioner Mark Basant, lead editor of the investigative desk at Guardian Media Limited. Some of the victims who would have given information to you all, who have spoken with personally and continue to speak with several other victims, they have expressed fear for their lives based on the information that they have given and continue to give. What conditions are put in place to ensure that they are safe?
Yeah, well, in contrast to some who said that all is right with the world and this was much ado about nothing, we actually have a few persons under witness protection right now that we are having them properly secured because of the information that they have brought to us. This is a much bigger picture, and I intend to spread it as much as possible, because even if certain family members are fully aware of what it is that that individuals had to endure, they themselves may become culpable. So we are also looking at that to assist the individuals who might be very vital in providing information to us at this time.
Of course, you had mentioned the possible involvement of some police officers who might have been cognizant of this happening in that particular division and maybe across the country. How far along have you all started the investigation through the PSB in relation to those specific officers?
Yes, we have ignited it through the Professional Standards Bureau, and they are actually looking to ensure that this was based possibly on not good policing, rather than the police actually be aiding and abetting and being involved in a situation like this. As I stated, there's no individual citizen in this country that is above the law, but at the same time, we are not here to witch hunt. I am not going to allow any organization, any individual to take advantage of any other citizen in this country and use their advantage to break the law. Anything you'd like to say?
again, I appeal to families, and I think we need, when we now have this collaborative effort in public awareness, raising that public awareness for family members, because what we discovered as well, some of the families, out of love, didn't know that their very acts were ones of abuse, in the way that they were manhandling or shouting or bawling at them and, putting them in a corner, not following up to see if they had a meal and so. So it's a level of ignorance as well. So we really have to educate and sensitize the public, because we are an aging population that is not going to reverse in a very long while. By 2025, we should be 17% of our population, 17.5, that is old. That is a lot of people. And that we have, so I agree with him, I commend him, and I always kept saying we need to go door to door, because many of the cases underreported as well. So we have to find where these persons are, as well as persons who are now not only persons with disability, but who are now old. So it's like a double whammy. They have comorbidities, and we have to find where they are. And this is also linked to another arm under the national security called the ODPM. Because even when you have to evacuate, like how we see the evacuation and raising awareness when it is disaster preparedness, when the climate change, we have to understand that even when we have to get shelters for the elderly, and even those elderly who have dementia, they are not to be placed in the same shelter with everybody else, because they need different amenities and facilities. So this is the start of a long host of things that have to come. It's like a whole suite of services that have to be administered to this group and other vulnerable groups. Thank you so much.
Commissioner, while we understand your justification in using the terms human trafficking and so forth, did you consider perhaps the use of these terms with the international media and so forth? Could this have far-reaching effects on this country in terms of tourism and the human trafficking report and whatsoever?
Okay, Robert, would you like, it seems that we have to say it for the fourth time. Would you explain the meaning of trafficking internationally in line with what we saw? It seems like we have to say it slowly for them to understand.
Yes, Commissioner. It's extremely important to understand that what we have seen in Trinidad and Tobago these last couple of weeks is completely in line with what we're seeing around the world globally. In the United States, organizations that are on the front designed to offer resources and services are taking advantage of children, of adults, of elderly, because they are involved in an organized crime process of facilitating human trafficking. And it's because of the appetite that's out there, that's promulgated by the internet, social media, and the advantage or the disadvantage that children have to defend themselves against these exploitations. This is what we're seeing around the world globally. If you connect with, and we have, myself and Dr. Powell have connected with Interpol and Europol, they are seeing this around the world. And just what we're seeing in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is what Dr. Powell and myself have been sharing with the TTPS for the last several months. Because it's a problem that hides in plain sight, a lot of things can be missed. And that's why the education piece for all entities who will interface with this problem is extremely important.
And therein lies the problem. We feel to solve a problem is just to ignore the problem. This is something that is international. It is global. Trinidad and Tobago is part of the globe. By burying our heads in the sand and pretending that what we saw did not take place, I didn't cause the problem. I exposed the problem. And I'm here to assist in rectifying the problem, which is why I have the individuals here to show that this is an issue. But people we seem concerned about us exposing the truth. Well, the truth hurts. And probably it is what it is. You can't handle the truth. Well, that is it. And we need to face the truth, face reality, and understand that if we spend all of the time putting focus on the meaning of trafficking instead of making emphasis on putting the focus on trying to deal with a serious problem that is affecting the elderly, affecting mentally challenged persons in this country, affecting children, but we want to spend all our time trying to understand the meaning of trafficking. We need to put our emphasis where it matters.
Okay.
Can you say how many people
Ms. Powell?
Yes, Ms. Moore.
I just wanted to add one thing. Even in the United States, we're flying this plane and fixing it at the same time. It really is not that easy. Globally, we struggle with identifying human trafficking, again, like Mr. Clark said, it hiding in plain sight. I think what's most important is to understand that traffickers will go after those that they see as vulnerable. And that is what you're exposing right now, is having this conversation about seeing people in their most vulnerable states possibly being preyed upon. And I think that's so important for everyone to understand, especially when we talk about see something, say something. And again, I think it's also important that those families may not have known the situation that their family members may have been involved in, but who did know were the people that put them in those cages.
Can I follow on that and ask exactly how many? Because the report seemed like all 69 were in cages.
No, that is incorrect.
Can you say exactly how many were?
I wouldn't want, there were probably about 20 odd that were in cages, and some of them very calm, very quiet, elderly ladies crying and saying that they've been in there for 2 years and they can't get out. An individual who actually stated that he was handcuffed in the public. He was brought into the location. He has reports of persons using tasers. He was forced to sign documents. So,
There were no physical signs of injury.
no, I would not be. Now you're going into technicalities. I cannot and would not reveal matters that are being investigated. So, Mr. Chandler.
Yeah. I just want to expand on something, Commissioner, just because basically the last question that you fielded, there seems to be a perception that trafficking in its interpretation is limited. And I think that is the issue, and that is the conversation that the Commissioner is having here. That look, trafficking is more than what the general disposition seems to be. It envisages a lot of things, exploitation, and that is why the lawmakers, Parliament, in its infinite wisdom, would have set out in its interpretation section what exploitation is. And exploitation goes in depth into what they envisage. So for instance, when we talk about keeping a person in a state of slavery and subjecting them to similar practices and just taking advantage of people generally, the vulnerability, as Dr. Paul would have alluded to. So we must understand the context in which the term is being used. It's not being used loosely. It's being used in a legitimate way. The Commission is actually quoting what the law is. But the problem is people aren't aware. And so we are now sensitizing persons as to what exactly the law is and what trafficking involves.
What's the difference between trafficking and kidnapping?
Trafficking and kidnapping. Kidnapping would involve at times a demand for a ransom. Kidnapping is you're holding the person. You're holding the person against their will and that sort of thing. In trafficking, not in all instances, they would be there voluntarily, but for a particular reason. So there are certain differences in the matrices.
Like in, for example, slavery. Slavery is not just what it is we experienced 200 years ago. It can involve an individual who is confined, he's not receiving remuneration, and someone may actually be benefiting from that financially. And that is
What were they working?
The individuals?
Actual work for, in the interview that you did with a Jamaican radio station, they said that they were doing chores as part of their living arrangements.
No,
Is that what you consider
no.
slavery?
Well, the thing is, they didn't speak to 69 persons, and that's why I said each and every investigation will be isolated, will be a different person, and when you do the investigation, it will be different.
How long was your investigation? I got your information from a member of the media. How long was your investigation before you decided to raid?
And I wish to thank that member of the media, because that is what you call proactivity, that is what you call professionalism, not trying to justify wrongdoing. Akishan?
Alright, but the question is, how long between this investigation was going on? For 2 months?
I'm not going into details. I'm not going into details of intelligence gathering. You want to be a James Bond.
Okay, Mr. Hayes.
Right? You want to be a James Bond. Go on.
So in July, there was a raid at a bar in Columbia where 21 persons were arrested, including the owner of the bar. Can you give us an update?
No, this interview is just solely based on this. I'll deal with that another time. Yeah, I know it, but
All right, that's it, sir.
That's it.
I want to take this opportunity to thank our guests, Dr. Jennifer Rose, Mr. Robert Clark, and Ms. Stephanie Powell. Thank you very much. Mr. Chandler, thank you very much for your insight. Commissioner of Police, thank you very much. Members of the media, thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. We'll see you another date. Thank you very much.